Are you sure that you set the charger down for that? Are you sure that you set the charger for that? Might run out of battery, let's record it.
Okay. Yes, okay.
You want to do it? Yeah, charge it now.
What we'll do is, if it gets to what we'll do is we'll wait till the break. If we need to.
When's the break? Is it 1 hour? Oh shit, the case weight.
What's this sound like?
What?
Turn this down.
Oh, you don't take it out?
What I'll do is periodic, I'll go to the back and then I'll just check it.
Well, you could also just go down the road a bit, wouldn't you? Actually, no,
Can we move it forward to our doctor to go back?
It's definitely good then.
I don't think, even right now, look, it's already zoomed in now. You can only cover half the bench, really. So I don't know if you're on anyone.
Definitely good.
If you want to get out, I'll get it.
If the angle good enough, you think, or not?
Angle.
Let's put angle confidence. That's okay, that angle's alright. We should do it like that.
Time to support this one.
It's either half 7 or 8 o'clock when we don't, you know?
You thought? What? I know.
Description.
I typed it in there. See if it's in
Yeah, we'll start.
There you go. And I had my whatever it is, Babuna. I don't know whatever it is.
What's the stream?
I click on the face back off now. Back off. Can you put it away? Thank you,
Literally, you know what it is? The third one, I know one of them's not He's not here.
Oh, can't you tell?
So Yeah, sorry, mate.
It wasn't so much I was I made this right. This is the world I built myself.
Maybe on, if you go on YouTube, you'll find it on camera.
Yeah, that was
That's female oil, yeah.
yeah, that's 17.
I mean, that's female oil. Type it in, just put it, I think it'll be fine.
DPT. A lot of that is through up
Hi. So you're broadcasting to Bishop Ferrell now?
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know if there's anybody at Bishop Ferrell because we haven't filled up.
When is it? It's not the 7:30, right?
It should be 7:30.
It's fine.
No one calls like this.
Begin a few moments.
It's gaming.
It should be like a sharing, people are saying somewhere, I'm not sure where. Being options on that one also. You look for it. I'm not
Oh, actually, yeah, let me see that. No, it's not. We'll figure it out.
All viewers now. Exciting time.
Also, talk to
Yep. Ted get a link to it and then he shares it.
We don't have room behind the bar. I'm sorry, guys. Just shove him in behind that chair or something.
You've got to make your product sound more efficient. As you know, that's bullshit. You've got to make your product sound more effective. What the first line does, actually go for the speech, long roll, you try to fix it. So you're not in a normal first line role. And what you need to do is your CV to reflect what you actually do, your experience and skills that you might feel that's I think the and then in your profile, prospects are one of the job, more responsibilities, more chance of doing, more prospects.
It's over there.
It would be kind of nice to get and you did come across as somebody who devoted to the cause. Your qualifications for
I want to get the water in it. I want to get some water in it. Might have to move back a bit.
You look at the number of sheets.
Alright, you want to go live, guys?
Live now,
Yep. You are live now.
Yep. Yeah, those some seats. Those some seats.
You want to get it up or down? No, it'll be alright. Yeah, we can do that.
Oh, hey, forget it. What do you want me to do? I'm talking about it.
What did she say?
Is that true?
Why did you say that? I was here.
I didn't say what she said.
That's to be 2-3 days.
Right, good evening everybody. Welcome to the Cap and Gown. My name's Ted Marshall. I'm the pub landlord, the real one. So, and this is the first of 7 debates, yes, that we're actually holding at the Cap and Gown on a variety of subjects relating, obviously, to the EU referendum, which is why you're all here. It is our first night. I think there may have been some confusion about the time we start, and we may get a few people floating in. We do expect the debates to really sort of grow. There's about 40 people in here. We can take 70 in total. But we do have up the road, and I'd like to welcome them. Can you see me on the screen, by the way?
Yep.
Am I moving around? I'd like to welcome anybody that's at the Bishop Perone School as well. Yes, they're joining us. We want to cheer, folks. We can't hear you, but if you're there, give us a cheer. And also at the King George V Community Centre. Where's that, Richard? King George? Yes, whereabouts is it? In Brickfields. So we're also broadcasting live to there. By the time of our third debate, we'll be going to schools in Kidderminster, there's a school in Hagley, there's Christopher Whitehead and various things. So this thing's going to build and build and build. So first of all, thank you all for attending, and thank you to the speakers. I'd particularly like to acknowledge Peter Jewell, who has actually helped me considerably. Up until 2 days ago, we didn't have any people speaking against the motion. And Peter's done a sterling job in stepping in, and Jim as well, who's actually come right the way up from the House of Lords. But my friend Richard Faulkner of Worcester, Lord Richard Faulkner of Worcester, who's in the middle here, I'm sure will introduce the speakers and say a little bit more. So welcome everybody. As I say, it's a 7-week programme. It is building. I'm going to do a bit of a cheer here, right? Because this is, the fact that it's pub politics, the fact that it's in a pub, the fact that we're actually doing 7 weeks of various debates. Tonight's on the economy, Monday's on business, then we've got EU migration, then we've got democracy in Europe, then we've got legislation and human rights, then we've got security, and then we've got the final debate. So we're really looking at it really in depth, and I think that's caught the attention of the media, the fact it's those 2 things. It's certainly not me, but we've actually got, for the first time, I think, in any pub's history, we've actually got BBC One News, coming on next Monday. We've got Mark Easton, who's the Home Affairs editor, and they're going to film the entire event, and they're looking for undecided voters in Worcester. On the morning of June 24th, after the referendum, Good Morning Britain, is actually filming from here, live, and we're looking for families in Worcester, 3 generations of them, with different views to actually be on live TV from the Cap and Gown. So that's mainline BBC and mainline ITV, which I think is tremendous. But what really thrilled me this week is that we got a phone call about 3 days ago from PBS, Public Broadcasting Service in America, which is actually the largest news network in the whole of America. And they're coming here a week on Monday to film the entire debate and are actually putting out a 12-minute documentary across the whole of the US to 15 million people. So can we have a cheer for that, folks? I think having America for a pub, for a little pub that can only take 70 people, says that we're doing something that I hope is going to be very, very popular and will spread around the country. That's the whole point, because it is about politics for the people, and it's about bringing democracy to the people, and it's about having real in-depth discussions, of people's views and so on, and it's about participation by you, the audience. We want passion, we want all of those things. We don't want a dull audience. For God's sake, you've got a drink in your hands, be happy, be controversial. Richard will control it. So, I'd like to I'm going to hand over in a second to Richard Faulkner, But I just want to introduce him, and Richard's been with me every step of the way. Richard, it's actually Lord Richard Faulkner of Worcester. He's a remarkable man. He's been in the House of Lords now for 17 years. I don't think you've ever been elected as an MP, have you? But you were a junior minister in transport. And Richard's, you know, he hasn't got that permission through being a political crony, let's put it that way. You've seen my back, you know, they all look bored there, don't they, really? You know, PMQs really look bored. Well, by the way, in terms of the signage, we're putting up a picture of Winston Churchill there because he's the big man. And we're actually going to do all caricatures of all the other prime ministers, all little, because they've all been little since Winston. And we're putting up here, yeah, we just had the pub refurbished, top to floor, that whole place is going to be full of rock stars, music, and politicians, and scandals. Right, we really are taking the piss, sorry. You've got to get the art, you've got to get the art. So we love politics in this pub, and we do take it very, very seriously. But just a little about Richard. Richard's been a resident of Worcestershire for 35 years. He just lives round the corner, yes, in the Arboretum. He's been there for 10 years now, I think. Went into new in the hot market or whatever. And he's been with me every step of the way planning this. I asked him to join us. You know, you can't get better, you know, than the Deputy Speaker of the House of Lords. So can we have, and I'll tell you a bit more about him in a second. He's done some remarkable things. He was the man, yes, that brought safety to Premiership grounds, for instance. He led everything. You know, you remember Hillsborough? Yeah, and Richard was the man that sorted that. He was the main person. He's also president of the Cotswold Line. And we're going to have in Worcester, by 2018, I'm told, yes, we're going to have 2 trains an hour. How good is that, to London? And getting there in under 2 hours. And Richard's sorting all that together, I think, with Worcester Parkway. He's the sort of president. And he's done other things. I think he stopped smoking. He was one of the leaders of the Stop Smoking campaign in the workplace. So he was the guy that stopped smoking in pubs, for God's sake, you know. I mean, why are we welcoming you, Richard? No, actually, I approve of that completely. And we become friends, you know. You know, he's a great guy. So, one thing I would say is that the debates here are always going to be fair and important. I was going to set the scene tonight. Richard actually has given me permission through him to talk to House of Lords researchers. I think tonight's debate, and I'm just going to summarise it, is, as I see it, how much does the EU cost? Is it £340 million a day, as the Brexiters say, or is it £300, £400 a year per household? There's a huge difference in those figures. And we see the propaganda from both sides, with respect, yes, to everybody here. What is the true figure? And actually, I suspect they're both right. Okay? When you actually net it all out, yes, and net back what's coming in as opposed to going out, because I do know that the 345 million is what we pay gross. That's before anything comes back. But I'll give an update next week after the debate, okay, on this. Or in a couple of weeks' time. We really do need to know what the real cost is. And I'm hoping these guys are going to have an intelligent debate about it. Let's not have propaganda. Yeah, let's get right down to the root costs and everything else, because there's a lot of issues, and it's not just economic. That's a very, very important thing. But it's certainly not net 345 million. I read it in The Independent, and they're usually right. So, but I'm not going to say any more about that. I should have done more research on that. I was going to put it up on presentation and all the rest of it. And what are the economic benefits? Yes, I mean, you know, in terms of trade, in terms of the whole thing. You know, we're trying to be impartial here. Richard will be impartial. I will try and be a little bit impartial. Not always impartial. That's why they call me Marshall. Anyway, so finally, thank you to Richard. Richard's going to chair every single debate. I know he's going to do a great job. And that's enough for me for now. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Ted, for that amazing introduction. You won a a nationwide reputation for your hustings at the election
I
time.
haven't.
And that is still talked about all over Westminster. And your idea of holding referendum hustings along similar lines, but in debate form, is one that I'm sure is going to be a huge success. So I'd like to echo Ted's welcome to everybody, and thank you all very much indeed for coming. Let me try to explain what we're going to be doing this evening. We have 4 brilliant speakers, 2 from each side of the argument, drawn from 3 different political parties, and they will have up to 10 minutes each. They may not decide to use all their 10 minutes, it's up to them, but they have an opportunity to put their cases for, as I say, around 10 minutes. When the 4th speaker has finished, there will be an interval. You may have to hear some more from Ted then, I'm afraid. I don't think I'm going to be able to stop him. But it's at that point I'd like you to use the little postcards that are on all the tables. And there are 3 things you can do with the postcard. Well, you do 4 things. You start by putting your name on it, and then you can put either a question, which we can put to members of the panel or individual members of the panel if you choose, a comment, which I can read out at the start of the second part of the proceedings, or you can say, I'd like to make a little speech. The stress, I should stress the word little. We will cut you off after 2 minutes, but if you want to speak for 2 minutes in the final hour of the evening, then that's up to you. And then at the end of all that, and I'm not quite sure how this is going to work, but Ted will tell us, we're going to have a vote. And I think the idea is we have a vote by show of hands here. We're going to have a vote by show of hands in the other locations where people are watching the debate. And before you all go home, we'll be able to announce the result of the way you voted on the first proposition. The first motion tonight for the 7 debates is the economic benefits of remaining in the EU outweigh the costs of membership. So this is an economic debate tonight. We're not talking about migration or security or social security, or any of those issues. We're talking about the economic benefits. If you want to talk about those other issues, you must come to the later debates, because we'll be covering all those subjects on Monday and succeeding Mondays, right up to the final Monday before referendum day. At that point, unless I left anything out, Ted, I would like to start by introducing the first speaker. In which case, let me do that. Delighted to say the first person to speak to us is Philip Bushell-Matthews, on my right here. He was a Conservative member of the European Parliament for 10 years until 2009. He had a management career in the food manufacturing industry. He's a native of Droitwich, so he's a Worcestershire boy. He was for a while the leader of the British Conservatives in the European Parliament. He has written a book called The Gravy Train, and another one called Who Rules Britannia. You may want to say something about those. And he's been, until 2004, the Vice Chairman of... 2014, I'm sorry, the Vice Chairman of the Coventry and Warwickshire Partnership NHS Trust. Highly respected European politician from the Conservative Party, and we're delighted to have him here this evening.
Well, thank you, Chairman, for that gracious introduction. Thank you, Ted, for putting all this on. Thank you, all of you guys, for coming and for promising me that you're going to be very nice to the 2 people this end and really stretching to the questions for the 2 people that end. Because that's the way the debate is going to work. Anyway, I'm going to start, if I may, by taking off my jacket.
Quite right. Too bloody hot.
Partly to pretend that I'm normal, but there's no offence to my colleagues, but I'm going to keep my tie on. Also because it's a bit warm at this end, but having talked to a few of you before it started, I know it's going to get a downside hotter as the evening progresses. Anyway, I want to talk to you a bit about the economics, and particularly some facts about the economics. Some of you may argue whether these are facts or not. I would maintain that they are facts. Did I hear a little laugh from someone?
My name's John Maynard Keynes.
Ah, right. Okay, I believe. So, to start with, I'm just going to talk about give you a few facts about how being in the EU benefits consumers. Right? Now, the first fact is from the Independent Centre of Economic and Business Research, who have done this study that says that in the UK, average price saving from EU membership is considerable, and I've got all the specific numbers, in terms of food, for dairy products, sugar products, cereals, and even, not that this will be of interest to people around the table, this table here today, even for alcoholic beverages. Prices are lower because of our membership of the EU, and I've got the stats here. May surprise someone. The cost of air flights come down by 40% because the EU changed the rules to allow low-cost airlines based in the EU, such as EasyJet, to enter the market. Mobile phone roaming has been under attack from the EU, and I was involved in some of that legislation because we all felt, as maybe you felt, that some of the big companies were ripping people off with the roaming charges once you left your home country. They have come down by 73p in every pound as a result of membership of the EU. There's a lot going on in terms of the digital market, which is going to bring down costs again. The final thing I just want to mention is healthcare. Because we're members of the EU, we have the European Health Insurance Card, the EHIC, which is a free scheme whereby any member state can get healthcare within any other EU member state. Now, those are immediate benefits, immediate facts that have been earned by our membership of the EU. Now, some may say, yes, well, those are there on the table, and the negotiation being held by the UK after a Brexit result will mean that we will enjoy all of those benefits. All I would say is good luck to the negotiating team. The list of things to be negotiated is getting longer and longer, and I do not know of any organisation that can find a way of allowing people to come in and get all the benefits of that organisation just through negotiation without paying for any of the costs or following any of the rules. But that's for others to decide. Now, the final little thing I'd mention about the healthcare abroad is that's a particular relevance to pensioners, people living and working abroad, but there are over 1 million EU pensioners living in warmer climes than the UK. They are reliant upon pensions in pounds. The value of the pound is highly relevant to the quality of life that they can have in their newly adopted country. Sadly for them, if they've been out of the country for 15 years, they will not get a vote in this referendum. I personally think that's unhelpful, but we are where we are. But they will clearly be very much affected by the outcome of this referendum because the value of the pound will make a huge difference to what they can do and whether they can continue to live where they are. And it's the value of the pound I want to come on to for the rest of my few minutes, particularly in the light of what the Governor of the Bank of England said today. Now, in terms of fact, the day after Boris Johnson announced that he would be one of the leaders of the Brexit campaign, pound sterling fell 7%. So one cannot just say there is a risk of the pound falling if Brexit took place. We know as a fact it fell as a direct consequence. Now, when I was talking in rugby with James, he made the very valid point that, of course, if the pound falls, that may help our export prices. But with respect, James, that doesn't take account, I would suggest, of various other key facts. The first one is that we import much more than we export, so it will affect our prices much more for those people who are buying and selling in the UK. But secondly, that the inflation rate, the fall in sterling happened not because we, the country, or we, the government, willed it to happen because of this benefit on exports. The pound fell because the markets decided it would fall. So the lovely slogan that says, make your own laws, control your own destiny, doesn't seem to work very well because as far as sterling is concerned, the markets will decide, and the markets have decided. If you listen to the Mark Carney, Governor of the Bank of England, report today, he said, if Brexit takes place, the risk of materially lower path for growth and a notably higher path for inflation. sterling is likely to depreciate further, perhaps sharply, because of a record current account deficit, i.e. my point about more imports than exports, that makes us uniquely vulnerable. It may also call into position the ability to maintain the current large scale of capital inflows, currently we're the greatest beneficiary of foreign direct investment of any EU member state. We've had some 24 billion per year over the last 10 years. Any abrupt decline could push major financing difficulty for the UK. Now, Lamont and Black and Redwood have immediately dismissed all of this because it doesn't suit their case. They said it's nothing to do with the Bank of England's remit. It has everything to do with the Bank of England's remit. They have a mandate to be transparent with the British people on what are the forward projections for the economy based upon known inputs. And the known input is a falling pound would do a whole lot of things. So, the final little comment I would just make is from the Institute of Fiscal Studies, which just says that if leaving the EU reduced national income, the impact on the public finances would dwarf the UK current overall net contribution. I'll leave it to my colleague to talk about what that contribution is, but just putting it into context, it is a much, much bigger issue than simply the payments we make in. There are lots of benefits we take out. All of those would be at risk if we left. We know exactly where we are, for better or for worse. I'd say for better if we stay in. End of section 1. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Philip. You've got us off to a terrific start. Got lots of food for thought here, and we've now got 3 more speakers to come. The next speaker may well be known to a number of you if you're a follower of Worcestershire cricket, because Peter Jewell is a former player for the County Cricket Club, and he's currently a member of the board of the cricket club. He is another Worcestershire boy, born in Redditch, and in addition to playing cricket at county level, he was also Peterborough United's goalkeeper, and I think a professional rugby player in South Africa. So a sportsman of no little reputation, and it's great to have him here. But that's not why he's here this evening. He's here because he is treasurer of UKIP. He's a close friend of Nigel Farage. We encouraged him to get involved in UKIP politics. And since he's been a professional player, he has had a very, very successful business career. And I'm looking forward to hearing what he's got to say.
Thank you very much. I did one of these about an hour ago with one of your colleagues, Malcolm Harbour. And that was on with a whole lot of lawyers and businessmen in Kidderminster. I did talk about your book, by the way. Oh, Gravy Train, I recommend it. I do recommend it. It's 65p on Amazon, but it's actually not.
It was only 1p a few
Right,
weeks
no,
ago.
I'm actually being serious because it's a good read, and I'm not too sure why he's not sitting this side, but never mind.
Read it again.
So to talk about some of the economic effects of the EU and for us. In itself, it should have absolutely no difference. The market itself will shudder. It'll shudder either way. And you've got to remember, that's what the market wants. It wants it to go up and down because they make money when it goes up and down. So they will create anything to make the market move about. Mervyn King, we talked about the Governor of the Bank of England, the previous Governor of the Bank of England. I sit on a board with him, and it's been publicly noted that he believes that it will have no overall effect. To start with, it will shudder and shake, but we will be better off financially. And there's a lot of logic to it. We're business people, that's what I've done, and I stand here not as a UKIP member, I stand as a person, whatever party, we're going to have to decide what we want to do on June the 23rd. So, from a business point of view, you've got to look at how it's going to affect us. We can go and trade with anybody we want if we come out. We're not restricted. We don't have to go and ask Europe. We don't have to look for treaty changes. The EU, with the EU at the moment, we've got, and I believe the latest figures are going to come out to about 90 billion deficit. So if there's a 90 billion deficit with the EU, that means we are buying more from them than they do from us. They're going to be coming to us, not us to them. The French farmers, to start with, really, really need us to buy their products. If we don't, the French farmers do not mess about. They'll bring things to a standstill if the French government sit around and don't do a deal. Now, I also believe the best people to do a deal would be the business people, not the politicians, because most of them haven't done too much in business anyway. So it'd be better off to stay out of it. So we can start to trade in other areas on our own that we're already doing, but it shouldn't have that much effect, and it could be beneficial for us. As far as the value of the pound is concerned, yes, it will drop a bit. It has already dropped a bit. That has some benefits to a certain extent, but it will get, if it gets too strong, it becomes difficult for us to manufacture. Now, one of the things that came up earlier, the manufacturing, we were a manufacturing nation. What are we now? We're not a manufacturing nation. I'll give you a perfect example. When I went off and I didn't go and play for Worcestershire and I didn't go and play for PW United, I ended up, because I wasn't told I'd got been selected to play for them, by the way, I was supposed to be in Rhodesia, as it was then, for 3 months. One of the things that really struck me is that every single thing in that country was made in Britain. All the machinery, everything else was made in Britain. Where are they now? We don't do these things. It's made in other countries. China, Japan, Germany. We need to go back to be manufacturers. We're having to do various things. For instance, I know we're not getting on to the climate side, but we've got coal that is bags of it. That's a security issue. We could look after ourselves. What you have to do is to put carbon capture on top of the coal-fired power stations. We should look after ourselves. Nobody talks about doing things with thorium. We're going to give our power to another country to be able to put in a nuclear power station. Very dangerous. Very dangerous. I've spoken about the deficit. So where can we take that part in future? Negotiate ourselves straight away without messing with it. Hard negotiation. I'll say it straight. Hard-ass negotiation. That's what you've got to be able to do. Don't mess with it. Do a deal, do a business deal, and there have been jokes about Trump. I'll tell you the one thing that he will do, he will always do a deal. Right? Forget all the political side, he'll do a deal. And so will Putin. He wants to do business in this country. So there's all sorts of people that we can trade with and grow. What about our other Commonwealth countries? Why are they being excluded from this? You know, that is where the immigration side comes into it. Because at the moment, people are coming into this country, we are paying, from an economy point of view, we're paying a fortune on security. Absolute fortune on security. Because we have no idea who's in here, or very little idea what's going on. And we have to have a simple Australian system so we can grow and bring in the people that we want to have. We have to have some specialisms. We need trained people, but we don't need people who are going to milk the system. So I'm not against immigration, I'm for immigration. But it will help us economically to maintain that immigration growth when it goes back to 30, 40,000 a year, and at least we can decide who we're going to have. And from any country. Why not from Australia? Why not from New Zealand? Why not from the United States? Why not from South Africa? Anyway, so that is my opening gambit for this, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Peter. That was an excellent introduction from your side. Our next speaker is Phil Benyon, another Phil. He is a former Liberal Democrat member of the European Parliament representing the West Midlands. He's an agricultural specialist who advised Charles Kennedy, the Liberal Democrat leader, on agricultural issues, and he's a farmer, and so he knows a bit about the sector as well. He's very welcome, and I look forward to hearing him.
Thank you, Richard. Now, I'm going to try to do something very difficult and make sense of things like free trade agreements, the common market that we joined in the 70s and how that transmuted itself into the single market that you'll have heard a lot about just recently, and then try to explain why that single market is so important for the British economy and why it's such a great risk if we leave it. Now, if we go back to when we joined, what we joined then was the common market. It wasn't a single market because it didn't have a single set of rules. But when we joined, we got a huge trade boost from that. It was very, very good for the British economy. It meant that any of the tariffs and quotas that had existed before, it means within that common market there are no tariffs, no quotas, and largely you can trade freely, except that what we found by the time we got through to the middle of the 1980s was that it was still imperfect in many, many ways, particularly because of non-tariff barriers. In other words, every single country in Europe had its own set of standards. So when a manufacturer was trying to produce goods to sell across Europe, he found that it could the same radio or the same widget, whatever you were producing, you could only sell it in one or two countries because everybody had got different standards. So very much at from the push of the British government under Thatcher and then Major, in the late 80s and coming up to 92 when we got the single market, the decision was made that what we actually needed was a single set of rules guiding the marketplace. Because basically what was happening was that the French particularly were blocking things simply by changing the rules on what was needed. So over a number of years, we came then to get, we found ourselves with this single market after Maastricht in 92. And the single market meant that we have a single set of rules. So now we have a proper single market where a manufacturer, and I spoke about this with a manufacturer not very far away in Ulster, who manufactures shredding machines for councils. These big shredding machines that shred branches and leaves. And he said when I spoke to him, he just sent 2 machines out of the yard. Both had just gone on a lorry. One had gone to southern Italy, the other one had gone to Edinburgh, and he said it's exactly the same process. So not only are there no quotas and no tariffs, but you know that if you can sell it in Britain, you can sell it in Italy, you can sell it in Germany, so you can actually use a single production line for your production. So you are producing to European standards, and it's very, very easy. This is why manufacturers, almost all manufacturers, want to stay in. The manufacturers are very, very solid behind staying in the single market in the European Union. Now, also, at that point that this common market became the single market, we had enlargement to the east, which meant that for some of those countries, they were very, very worried that their industry was very uncompetitive. So they said, well, what's in it for us? So part of that single market is free movement of labour. the right to live and work in any member state. And it's part of the single market, very much as an integral part of it, because that's the quid pro quo. We can sell goods to them and they could send people to us. And that's how it worked, and that's how it continues to work today. I'm going to go back to something Philip said now, because he said that we have been very, very successful at bringing in inward investment into this country. And that inward investment has come from companies from all over the world. Now, this started in the 1980s as we were building up to the single market. And we brought in companies like Toyota and Nissan, and they are here to supply the entirety of the European market, not just the British market. By being here, they're also British companies. They have formed British subsidiaries, which makes them European companies, and this exempts them from any of the quotas that we put on Japanese imports or American imports or any other imports from the rest of the world. So it's very, very important for these companies that Britain stays in, because if we leave the European Union and leave the single market, then these companies will find that they're in the wrong place. You actually look at what they've said. They said, well, we will have to review our investment plans if Britain leaves, because we've built our business model over a period of 20 or 30 years on supplying the entirety of the single market from one place. And this is what's happened all over Europe. You can find other companies that are in different countries, but Britain has been the champion, the European champion, at attracting this investment since the 1980s. And we're well ahead of Germany, well ahead of everybody else. So we have this situation where a lot of the manufacturing sector, and we have 7,500 American companies here as well, that are in the same position. It isn't just these big obvious ones like Toyota. And remember that Toyota don't just produce right-hand drive cars for the British market. 90% of the cars that leave that factory just outside of Burton-on-Trent, it's commuting distance from where I live, 90% of the cars are left-hand drive cars that they are actually producing for Europe. Now, if suddenly they're not a European company, then they're subject to all the same problems as exporting those same cars from Japan. Yes, we can do a trade deal, but trade deals are not unfettered access to the single market. They take years and years and years. There's a lot of detail because they're not complete. They don't just give you unfettered access. They are sectoral. They have reduced tariffs. They still have quotas, but they may have a bigger quota. So a trade deal is not the same thing as this unfettered access, which you, because with that single market, you are simply selling things. When you sell things into another European country, it's exactly the same as selling it in the UK, and that's not the same when you have a trade deal. So for that reason, this is why the single market is such a valuable thing to the British economy, because all of those multinationals are here to make use of that single market. They like being in Britain. They like we speak the international language. We have good company laws. We have kept our employment laws sensible. So they like being here, but without being part of the single market, they will still find themselves in the wrong place. And over a period of time, the likelihood is that they will move their investments elsewhere. It's very similar for some of the British companies, and I'm just going to go on to research here, because since we left, since Britain pulled out of funding research many, many years ago, my PhD was funded by the British government. They hardly fund any anymore. Most of the research money is now coming from Europe. And Rolls-Royce have just said, Rolls-Royce now also have a place in Germany, they have a place in Slovakia, and what they've said is they will develop their next aero engine in a country where they can access the research money. They've just got £3 billion for one project that is actually taking place in Nottingham. Now, if we're outside of that system, then Rolls-Royce will be looking at using their Berlin facilities to develop the next engine rather than the Derby facility. So it's in this area you can see that there's a huge amount of dependence of the British economy. What we've built is a very successful model, and we've built that model for over a period of 25 years. And if we leave the single market, which now it looks very, very clear that will happen if we leave the European Union, if we leave the single market, that model that we've built up successfully over 25 years is completely undermined. Now, the quantification of this, which I was asked to give very, very quickly, the models that have been run show that being a member of the single market is worth somewhere between 60 and 120 billion to the economy. 60 billion to 120 billion. And this is why it dwarfs the amount that we spend, the 8.5 billion that we actually pay net into Europe every year. This 120 billion, or 90 billion, right? If you take the midpoint of 90 billion value to the British economy, then 40% of the British economy ends up in the Treasury. Roughly 40%. This is why George Osborne's figure of 36 billion is believable, because if it's worth 90 billion to the economy, then it's worth 36 billion to the Treasury. So the Treasury is paying 8.5 billion into Europe at the moment, but if we leave, the likelihood is over 2 or 3 years, it will lose 36 billion pounds in taxation because of the collapse in the economy. So I'm going to leave it at that. So I think it's very, very clear that the economic interests of the British people and the British economy is to stay in the European Union and in the single market.
Thanks very much indeed, Phil. I know that some of the things you were saying is provoking a reaction, not least from our fourth speaker, who I think may be proposing to answer one or two of them in a second. Before I ask Jim Carver to speak, can I just draw your attention to the postcards, please? We do need for the second part of the evening to be a success for you to take part in this. Please put your name at the top, and if you're making a comment or a question or a wish to speak, please fill those in and get them to me during the interval. I've had one already, which sadly wasn't signed. I hope the gentleman who gave it to me will be willing to give me his name, and then we can use it in the second half. Right, we're now coming on to Jim Carver, who is the current serving member of the European Parliament for the West Midlands in the UKIP interest. He was elected in 2004. 14, I'm getting years wrong, 2014. Yes, it seems like 2004. He is one of the more colourful and interesting political figures in Britain. His family business makes umbrellas, and he comes
That's
from...
because it's got out hair. Sorry, Jim. That's right.
And he is believed to be the only British parliamentarian who comes from a Romani family. I think his grandmother was a member of the Romani community, and he has been very, very diligent in speaking up for their interests on the European stage. I'm delighted he's with us here this evening. He's got a very busy life, and I'm delighted to hand over to him now.
Well, thank you so much, and again, thank you to Ted, and thank you to everybody for coming along this evening. And I hope people will be coming week after week, because Ted's put together a great list of speakers here, speaking on many different subjects. But what we're here tonight to do is talk about the question was, the economic benefits of remaining in the EU outweigh the cost of membership. Well, I would argue there are no economic benefits of our membership of the European Union. And I actually think the great cost of our European Union membership is something that can't be measured on a balance sheet, and that is our ability to govern ourselves. I believe sovereignty is a very important word, and it is something that cannot be given away. It is something I often hear as one of your MEPs of the word, how sovereignty has been pulled within the European Union. Well, if you look up the definition of the word sovereignty in the Oxford Dictionary, it is the ability to pass one's own laws and govern oneself. So I say you can no more pull your sovereignty than you can your virginity. It is something you have or something you do not have. It's as simple as that. And I believe the great strength of our country is its political accountability. It's very simple. If we don't like what our politicians do, we don't vote for them at a general election. We did that to Mr Major, to Gordon Brown, and of course more recently to Mr Clegg. But of course, as one of your members in the European Parliament, I don't have the ability to initiate or repeal legislation. That can only be done through the Council of Ministers' proposal from the European Commission. So we find once a European law is in place, unless we have unanimous agreements, that law cannot be changed. And that to me sums up why the European Union is a failing project, because the world has moved on a lot further from the common market that we joined back in 1973. And I actually speak as someone who was formerly a Social Democrat. I was previously in favour of a common market. Indeed, my mother voted for a common market back in 1975, and like anybody in this room under the age of 58, I'm looking forward to having my opportunity to vote on this pivotal subject for the very first time in my life. But of course, we have to talk, and you can have a debate on the economic benefits, merits, failures of the European Union, but you will have half experts saying one thing and half the experts saying another thing. And it's just going to confuse people. I could throw figures at Phil, and Phil could throw figures at me, and I think all that happens is more and more people go away scratching their heads. But what's actually relevant is how the world has changed since we joined the common market back in 1973. The world is a far smaller place than it was. As Richard kindly pointed out, I'm an umbrella maker. I now, by my own industry, has changed completely over the last 40, 50 years. I now do business buying umbrella components from suppliers in the Far East at the press of a button, transferring money digitally into my suppliers' accounts. The world is a far smaller place. And at the end of the day, companies trade with companies. The consumer will buy a product they like. Countries do not trade with countries. And the other point is that the world has changed with regards to free trade. The World Trade Organization has come about since our membership of the European Union. And we don't even have to be members of the European Union to trade with the European Union. We don't even need to have a trade agreement, a formal trade agreement with the European Union to be able to trade with them. In 2014, the United States of America exported £206 billion worth of goods to the European Union. And in the same year, the Republic of China exported £302 billion of goods to the European Union. And they did that without a free trade agreement. They don't need a free trade agreement. You can work under World Trade Organization rules. And any suggestion that this is about a single market, that is not the case. I am my own party's Commonwealth spokesman. And what I find really frustrating is the punitive agricultural tariffs that are being placed on countries within the African continent who produce good agricultural products, but because of high tariffs, they're not able to import into the European Union. So what we're finding is that we're throwing more money in foreign aid, and we're not giving those countries the ability to actually invest in their own infrastructures in the way they'd like to. We don't want people relying on aid. We want free trade and fair trade. And that is surely the way we should be going. What we should not be doing, as I did on Monday in the European Parliament, we voted on renewing 2 fisheries agreements, one with Liberia and one with Mauritania, 2 countries on the west coast of Africa. Now, no one would argue anything other than the common fisheries policy has been an absolute economic disaster for our country. We see what's happened to our fishing communities in England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. We've seen what's happened because of the ecological disaster that's been caused by the decimation of our fish stocks. And now we're finding that the European Union are moving European Union fishing fleets. Indeed, we have one boat, a Dutch boat, that takes 25% of the UK's fish quota. That can't be right. That cannot be right. And now we find European fishermen moving into fishing waters off the west coast of Africa through deals signed, and the same thing is happening. Fishing communities are being destroyed. Native fishermen are actually being mowed over in boats and being killed. It's an absolute disgrace. But we've got to look further than that. We've got to look further than the European Union, because I really believe the real debate isn't where we are now, it is where we're going in the future. And we can talk about trade, we can talk about throwaway remarks about Norman Lamont. But what does Norman Lamont know? I'll tell you what Norman Lamont knows. Norman Lamont was the Chancellor of the Exchequer during that terrible time when Britain had to exit the exchange rate mechanism. So I think he's possibly one of the best qualified politicians on the country to speak on the situation with regards to the real threats. I think the glass is always half full. And I see the European Union's demise as an opportunity for us to rekindle our links, not just with the Commonwealth, but with the emerging markets. I was today in the House of Lords with a New Zealand politician, a gentleman called Winston Peters. He's I think he's the only Privy Councillor currently sitting in the New Zealand Parliament, former Deputy Prime Minister of New Zealand. And he was here speaking about how Commonwealth free trade can be boosted by a vote for Brexit. So I think it's important we look favourably at our options in the world. I think it's important that we understand that the countries that have invested, not just in the region I represent, JLR, Toyota, they've invested in this country because they like the British consumer, they like the British work ethic. They're here, they've invested billions and billions of pounds, and they have a responsibility to their shareholders, to their employees, and to their customers, and they are not going to up sticks and move away, because they, as I've said, understand that companies trade with companies and the consumer is the way to go. In fact, it all depends on the consumer. And as I think Peter alluded to, we have a huge trade deficit with the European Union, an £89 billion trade deficit. That means that we buy £89 billion a year on the last year's figures, more from the European Union than they do for us. So why would they want to cut off their noses to spite their face? As someone that as Richard spoke about my travel heritage, I'm probably one of them. I'm a real mixer. I'm also called a Polish Jewish as well. So I love Poland. But what I think about the great strength of Europe is its diversity. What I don't want to see, and what I see frequently, and what I don't like, is the way we are being homogenised, pasteurised, and being made to be the same. There is no such thing as the European Union, or as Europe. Europe only exists as a continent. It doesn't exist as a political entity at the moment, where we all pull ourselves and become European. You know, everybody from every member state in their right mind wants what is best for their own member state. And I frequently, we're going to be doing it again, we're going to take the European Song Contest test, aren't we, and see how well we're really, really liked across the continent. Quite. And we saw what came back from the Prime Minister's renegotiations. And with respect, even pro-European members of his own cabinet are saying, you know, he didn't achieve what was required. And that's made the European Union's goals. I said, I used to be a social democrat, and I have to agree with Roy Jenkins, the late Roy Jenkins, of course, former president of the SDP, and latterly a president of the European Commission. And he said there are only two clear and consistent positions with regards to Britain's membership of the European Union, and that is all in or all out. We cannot pick and choose, ladies and gentlemen, and say to the European Union, we have the good bits, you have the bad bits. That is not the way business is done. If I go and buy umbrellas from one of my wholesalers, I'll walk in and say, right, okay, you say, Jim, I've got 4 pallets of umbrellas there, that's the deal, that's the price, and I'll look at them and I might see half of one of those pallets might be bright gaudy yellow or bright red with pink spots on, and I know I couldn't give them away to the Tuffy Club for a road safety campaign. But I can't turn around to my supplier and say, I'll have the 3.5 pallets, but you can have that. That's part of the deal. It's all or nothing, and it's exactly the same with the European Union. So we have to say, after 43 years, yes, let's be friendly with our European neighbours. Let's work together on areas where we can. But actually, I think we're going to get on a lot better when we reclaim our place in the wider world. And I think the world is our oyster. But if we remain inside the European Union, I see our future as a clam.
To close. 4 brilliant speeches with different points of view. It's now over to you to make sure that the second half of the evening is a great success. So please fill in those cards and get them up to me. And before we...
Or to me or anyone.
Or to Ted, or to anybody behind the bar. And I'm now going to hand over to Ted, I think, aren't I?
No, we're just going to break now.
We're just going to have a break now.
And then we'll see what starts.
Okay.